Well, I believe it's 6 a.m. in Wisconsin. And I would like to welcome all of you to the Red Lentil Global Outlook webinar and say thanks to our sponsors, Armada Foods and StatPub. My name is Cindy Brown, and I'm proud to serve as the president of the Global Pulse Confederation, or GPC, which is the apex body for the international global pulse industry. In addition to being the president of GPC, my other job is the president of Chippewa Valley Bean Company. As you know, the COVID-19 epidemic forced GPC to cancel our annual conference that was scheduled to take place in Dubai this month. The conference serves as a great opportunity to do business, to meet new people, to network, and to share important information. When the conference was canceled, as the president, I proposed that we set up a series of webinars called Ask the Experts. And last week, we had our first webinar, which was impact of COVID-19 on shipping, logistics, and the global food supply chain. We held it last Thursday with more than 250 people participating from over 50 countries. And today, we're holding our second one, the Red Lentil Global Outlook. We depend upon the financial support from our members to make these activities and webinars possible. Your support of GPC helps us in our critical mission to increase the awareness, production, and consumption of pulses. In addition, your support helps us advocate for open, predictable, and transparent international trade of pulses. Without the support of the industry members like you, we could never have achieved World Pulses Day, February 10th every year, and the International Year of the Pulse in 2016. But in these difficult times, GPC needs you more than ever. If you don't already belong, please take a moment to support GPC by going to globalpulses.com and signing your company for membership. And if you really believe in the pulse industry, we also have silver, gold, and President's Club level memberships available. If you'd like to increase your company's visibility, why not consider supporting one of these webinars? They are very successful, so please reach out to Randy Duckworth at GPC for more information. I hope you enjoy this excellent group of specialists on today's panel. Now let me introduce you to our moderator, Sudhakar Tomar of Hakan Agro. Sudhakar is a very active and highly respected member of GPC's executive community. And as managing director of Hakan Agro in Dubai, Sudhakar is someone that truly has his finger on the pulse of the global pulse industry. Sudhakar?
Thank you, Cindy. And these days, Corona salutations. This is what is going to keep us safe. First of all, let me begin by thanking our sponsors, Stat Publishing and Armada, whose contribution has made this webinar possible. Also, let me greet all our members and friends and colleagues and families in the Muslim world who will be celebrating, who will be starting the month of Ramadan, some places today, tomorrow. Lentils, we are here today, what I call the WrestleMania for the Red Lentils panel. And we have a very knowledgeable and informed panel, which is led by the analyst, Brian Clancey. Red lentils is indeed king of all the pulses, known as Masoor in Hindi, Urdu, others in Arabic, Merjimek in Turkish, Meser in Ethiopia, and a newly learned word called Masura in ancient Sanskrit. So before I introduce, before Brian starts his presentation, let me introduce Brian, an old-time friend and insider of the industry. So Brian Clancey is the Tom Clancy of the pulses reporting world. He has been reporting on the pulses pretty much when the Canadian production of lentils was 5,000 tons into today's 25,000 millions of tons now. And he has been reporting very impartially on his platform, StatPub, for a very long time. And he's probably the only one in our young age group who can finish a marathon within under 4 hours. So I would ask Brian to do a detailed presentation, and then I'll go individually introducing all my panelists and asking questions, and also making it very interactive question and answer session from all the attendees. You'll be very glad to know that we have more than 300 registrations, and from 50 countries, and hundreds of people are online with us, listening to us. So please let your questions keep coming in. And also, for all my panelists and also for all the attendees, there is going to be a quiz for prediction of the new crop red lentils price. The terms of that quiz I will share shortly after Brian finishes his presentation. Brian, please go ahead with your analysis.
Okay. I have to apologize because while I can get the microphone to work, as soon as I try to turn on the camera, the microphone stops working. So I'm going to just have to be an invisible person. I think the big thing that, when we're looking at the outlook for red lentils, one of the things that we're really talking about is what impact, what is going to influence farmers in what they are growing this year. And the biggest one is the relative returns to other crops, and which goes to the competitiveness of crops, like what will farmers won't be interested in growing. And the other factor is the ability of the farmer to sell what he grows. In the case of selling what he grows, farmers are not having a lot of problems with pulses this year. And with red lentils, the surpluses that we had accumulated in the last couple of years have been diminished a lot. And the movement off of farms is excellent right now. The other thing that's changed is that recently we've seen a shift in the competitiveness of other crops, and pulses in general are starting to move up again, relative to corn, relative to grains, or relative to oil seeds. One of the drivers behind the price of grains and oil seeds is the price of oil, and as you can see from the slide, that has declined precipitously in the last month or so, because of the coronavirus impact. Where this is important is that it influences the price of ethanol and influences the amount of corn that's used in ethanol. Right now, they're talking about a 40% decline. They're saying that 40% of the corn crop in parts of the U.S. is used to produce ethanol, but ethanol production is down a lot. That is slowly going to influence the price of corn and should have a negative impact on corn prices. And what that does is it improves the competitiveness of pulses in terms of other crops and encourages farmers to grow them. However, I think that the effect that we're seeing is going to be a little bit slow to have much impact this year on the decisions of farmers. But in February and March, we did see an improvement in pulse prices in general compared to the other crops, and that will pull land into pulses and into red lentils. One of the things that I also do when I try to figure out what farmers are going to do is look at the average return, the gross income potential of lentils versus other crops. And here I look at Canada. What I do is I compare that to the previous 3-year average. And what I found is that when prices rise or fall compared to the previous 3-year average, you tend to see a movement in the amount of land in the crops. Over the years that I've been tracking this, which is a dozen or so years or 15 years, there's a 76% positive relationship with wheat, 71 with durum, 82 with canola, and 76 with barley. That doesn't, that means that some years, of course, that the relationship appears to fall down, but it's quite positive. and it's a strong indication if you're following the relative gross returns, potential gross returns of red lentils versus wheat or durum or canola or barley. You can get an idea of what farmers are likely to be doing in the coming year. And there's a few graphs here which show what's happened. What I've done is I've extended this through my current expectations for this year about the gross income comparison versus the 3-year average, and my acreage predictions for next year. And you can see that there is a fairly positive relationship between them. And that's for durum wheat, is the same thing as there. And the same thing we see in canola. Canola is grown in slightly different areas, but there is an overlap in areas. We can see that lentil prices are down for red lentils, for green lentils, are down from where the highs that we set a couple of years ago. But what we are seeing recently is an uptrend, and that's reflecting immediate demand for product. So I think that the effect on price has been a little bit late to change a lot of growers' seeding decisions, but movement has been good. So I'm looking for a red lentil area in the world to go up over what was last year. I'm thinking almost 170,000 hectare increase in total. If yields are average, we will see about a 500,000 metric ton increase in production. But what's really interesting is that the residual supply is down from what it was at the beginning of this season, and that reflects the heavier movement that we're seeing for red lentils. The net result is that even though production is up 500,000 tons, available supplies will only be up about 240, so about half as much. And that's price positive in my mind. I think that overall trade will be up. There's an expectation that India could be buying a little bit more this year than it did last year. Even though India is fairly optimistic about its production levels, there was a recent policy decision affecting peas, which may have an impact on red lentils. And I say may because we don't know. And it all depends whether or not there's restrictions imposed on red lentils by the Indian government. The two changes that were important is that the import quota for peas was changed from being basically any peas into half green peas and half other peas. Yellow peas had dominated that, and so that may reduce the imports of yellow peas, which is important. The other important thing is that they have apparently changed the basis for calculating import duties, and the import duties are on the new basis will basically push the price of imported yellow peas over $2,000 a metric ton. That means that if India needs to plug any holes in regions for pulse supply through imports, it's going to be looking at lentils because they're currently one of the most economic pulses in the world. And we may be seeing that reflected in the amount of lentil import by India so far this season. Lentil production, again, when you look at where it's being grown in the world, Canada is the largest producer of red lentils. India is second largest, but India grows them for domestic use and imports what it needs for surplus consumption in the country. Canadian production, and these are all based on 5-year average yields. I don't, at this stage of the game, I don't try to say whether we'll have a positive or negative influence on yields. I wait. One has to wait and see how that works out. Canada has the potential for red lentil production to go up by over 200,000 tons. India's Rabi season forecast sees that going up by about 160. Turkey should be up again over last year. Production in other parts of the world up. So we're looking at a fairly significant net increase in red lentil production over last year, and compared to the previous 5-year average. Trade in red lentils, I feel pretty positive about. Looking for, an increase. It's not a huge increase overall, but it is significant when you look at the available supplies. I'm optimistic that Australia will be able to improve its exports this year. Canada should see increased export activity. Same with Turkey and same with other parts of the world. So world trade should be up, which helps support prices and help support grower interest in the crop. Usage, total usage. This is, I'm looking at more the domestic side. And Canada is very small, but India you can see is very big. And I think that there's a potential for usage in India to rise over what it will likely be during 2019 for this year. And that could carry into next year. And that should be slightly above the previous 5-year average. Turkey's usage should be up a little bit, and the usage in other countries as well. So we're looking at an overall increase in domestic consumption of red lentils by about 500,000 metric tons. The impact of that becomes clear when you look at the residual production. The residuals that we'll see at the end of the 2019-20 marketing year, I believe, will be around 557,000 metric tons in the world, and that will drop by about 250,000 tons by my estimation through next summer. In terms of price, I think that what that means is that even though prices could start off even with this crop year, as we move through the coming marketing year, we could see prices trending up. So I would expect with these numbers that the season highs will be set later in the season than earlier. And I guess the bottom line for this, spot demand is helped by COVID-19 because of consumer hoarding and consumer stockpiling, and a switch from meat products in some countries into pulses. That's happening in China, and that's happening in other parts of the world. And all of these things are net positive for pulses and positive for red lentils, because red lentils are quite price competitive in a lot of areas. Lentils are more strongly competing for land use, but the impact may happen a little bit too late to have a really big influence on how much is grown this year. And then I'm looking at production and demand being up for the coming season. And that is it for my overview. Thank you very much. So are there any comments from anybody about the numbers or their regions?
We will also share these numbers with all the attendees so they can have a closer look.
When we're looking at, a lot of the seeding decisions are made previous to now. So for instance, in Canada, by February, farmers would have finalized their seeding decisions. India's is in the ground, of course, and Turkey will be planting soon. Other countries have various windows, but seeding is already underway in most parts of the world. So the decision-making process of farmers was done before we're starting to see these more positive impacts on price for red lentils, and some of the demand for red lentils, which would have, which if that happened 3 months ago, then the amount of land in red lentils would probably be substantially higher than I'm currently forecasting. I feel optimistic that Australia will increase quite a bit because the grower bids there are very strong. I don't think they're at record levels, but they're certainly, up substantially from what they've been for the last couple of years. And they're higher than what we're seeing in Canada. In Canada, red lentils were really flat for a lot of time throughout much of the fall period and into January and February. And they only started to escalate in the last month or so. So it's a bit late. That may pull some, for farmers who can make a choice between what to grow on their land, that may pull some land into red lentils. But I don't think, there's, typically not a substantial change, but I'm looking for an increase here, and a fairly significant one of about 120,000 hectares. India is, according to the last rabi season estimates published by the agriculture department there, total land in lentils was down from what it was last year. I think later in the year they do some revisions, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Although India's number is always controversial. Turkey looks like it's up over last year, and I think that there will be increases in other parts of the world. The big thing is, as I said, when I start working on these early, I use 5-year average yields. So if you believe that yields will be below average, then that will influence the production levels. As it stands, with average yields, production will be up about 500,000 tons overall. Fairly significant gain in Australia and Canada, those two being big, and India could be fairly big as well. But I think there's an expectation that Indian production numbers will be reduced in the later months. Carry-ins are down. The carry-in for the coming season are down from last year. And that reflects late season movement. So we're looking at an available supply situation that is up overall, but not crazy up. It's below what it was in 2018-19, which was the year that we saw prices for red lentils go down a lot in the world, and way below what it was in 2016-17. So I feel fairly positive. I think the increase in available supply is going to be offset by export demand and domestic consumption. Excuse me. So I'm looking for overall exports to be up over last year, with Canada looking at a modest increase. Australia should see, most countries seeing the net exporting countries seeing overall a modest increase, but enough of an increase in combination with just normal domestic demand in those countries to result in substantial decreases in ending stocks at the end of the coming season. When you look at places like India, I generally work on the assumption that India consumes most of what it produces, but that by my calculation, they've been having residuals of red lentils for the last couple of years. And, that should continue, but that's been declining as well. And that reflects, as imports were reduced overall of all pulses, you had some demand driving into red lentils in India, and that's helped reduce the country's residuals. I think when I look forward in India, I see future problems unless they can not more rapidly increase their production of red lentils and other pulses, or allow increased imports. The net impact of all of this is that we're looking at huge reductions in residuals. Australia, for the second year in a row, should be effectively sold out. Canada could move into sold out territory for red lentils. India's residuals down. Turkey, very low again relative to what it has been in previous years. And other parts of the world, again, extremely tight relative to the amount that's consumed. Usually when you have a stocks to use ratio below 10%, that's generally considered sold out. But that's on a country by country basis. On a global basis, it's not quite the same. So I think the potential here is for red lentil production to increase again next year in 2021, just as farmers respond to the opportunities that are presented in the coming year, assuming that market demand doesn't collapse after December. India's imports, I think that they'll be up this year, but that's way off the peak. In 2015, 2015-16 or 2015, India imported 1.16 million metric tons of red lentils, 1.12 million in 2017. And so when we're talking about a 560,000 metric ton import demand for India for this coming season, we're not, it's not out of the world crazy. It's not super high relative to where that country has been in the past. So there's potential there for India. If India's needs are greater than what we think, they could become a price influencer on the positive side.
So question for India. How is the demand from India for whole red lentils?
Hi everyone. My name is Pawan. So the demand in India is very good. During the this lockdown and this COVID issue has raised the demand for the pulses. And the supply for the raw materials is very poor because of the lockdown. So whatever the material available at the ports is the only supplying to the entire India, and this will remain for the next 3 months, because as government has declared that they will supply 1 kg dal to 160 million families for next 3 months. So the requirement of the entire split pulses will be around 6 lakhs ton. So that create an additional demand for the next 3 months in India.
Okay. Okay, question. We've lost Mostin. Let me ask another question for Brian. What factors do you think could cause a collapse in demand after December? Right?
Yeah, actually, I think that we're seeing a spike in demand right now. It's not that there would be a collapse in demand, but a relaxation. There's been a general increase in spot demand, for India, for other parts of the world, domestic markets, and etc., because of consumers rushed to the stores and bought all the foods, non-perishable foods, and other items that they could, and that has resulted in that's depleted the supply pipeline, and that has to be refilled. So, assuming that the world is relaxed by the end of the year because of COVID-19. The supply pipelines should be all well restocked. So we should see it, we have the potential for a demand boost to occur through the end of the year, and then it will just simply relax after that, and we may move into more normal demand. The real question for our industry, for red lentils and for other pulses, is whether or not this increase in home consumption that we're seeing is going to be a permanent one or represent a new base level for domestic consumption of pulses and red lentils. And that's something that we have to wait for time to answer. But yeah, I think I would view it more just as a relaxation in demand than a collapse.
Okay, thank you, Brian. A question for Mostin. Mostin, are you still on? How much of the current crop is left in Australia for red lentils?
Well, I think price is indicative of how much is left. It's I think the market in general. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You're able to hear me? So the market in general believed that potentially carry-in was larger than what was actually there. We had a significant feed event over the last 2 years prior to this harvest. It seems to have cleaned out a lot of what was potentially carry, given the low prices we saw prior to the recent rally. And if we want to talk physical numbers, you're probably looking at the last 10% of available. If we want to run numbers again, you've got to say there's always going to be a carry through. Growers will always have some portion of tons left over, but running a base S&D, base demand, average demand, etc., we run out of lentils by July. So yes, there are lentils here at the moment, but on paper we are done by July. Does that stretch out into September, October with exports? Potentially small tonnage, but that just robs Peter to pay Paul from prior months. So really, from a front end point of view, Canada has to carry the exporting load for the world until we come on in November. So, yeah, if we want to talk tons, you're looking under the last 50,000 tons. It's tight, very tight.
We've seen a lot of hoarding and increase in buying. Do you think there'll be any late interest on the part of growers in North America to plant more red lentils beyond what Brian is showing?
Yeah, I think there is some potential there. We've seen new crop contracts drive up in price quite a bit over the last few weeks, and there's still time for some growers to put more in the ground. So, I think it's maybe a little late in some areas, but in other areas there will be more acres switched over to red lentils. We believe so. In terms of what that impact could be, I think, roughly a potential increase of 10% is possible. Beyond that would be difficult.
We'll ask another question for Pawan. Do you think due to the price rise, India can reduce the import duty in lentils, or NAFED would directly import from Canada to maintain the buffer stock? And you're on mute.
Looking at the price levels and the stock with the government, it might under consideration to reduce the duty, but probably government will think maybe later on, once the price levels for the pigeon peas has been crossed up more than MSP level. Till that time, government is more comfortable.
Okay. Kintal, are you there? Not yet. Okay, let me ask this question also to David. Do you think demand will slow down after COVID-19? Will the economic recession affect demand negatively moving forward?
So I think this situation with COVID is not a short-term one. Obviously, at some point it will improve, but I think this disruption will continue through into next year. And while people do tend to forget over time, traumas from the past, it will take some time. And I think the buying behavior of keeping stock in the pantry a little bit more will continue through into well into next year. So I don't see the demand decreasing in next crop year. I mean, we'll see after that, but this disruption is significant and will be lasting from our stand.
Very good. I think, Brian, this is probably a question for you, but if anyone else has any comments, they'd be appreciated. How do you see the production in Eastern Europe of red lentils?
We needed other people to answer that. I think that I'm thinking that it could be up a little bit overall. I think, Russia certainly has seen decent exports of lentils in total, but I don't know the breakdown between red and greens in Russia. And other parts of Eastern Europe have experienced the same thing, with good movement into some into the Indian subcontinent, a fair bit into Turkey, and into the Arab region or the Middle Eastern region. So that should encourage them. It's really a question of price competitiveness. If the farmers find it's very competitive, they'll want to grow more. And also, but it has to do with the prices that they're selling at. If they're selling, don't forget, the sales that they were making earlier in the year was in a different market condition than we are in right now. So they were at lower levels, and that has an influence on what farmers will want to plant. Because they look at what they were getting and decide what they'll plant. It's like if prices are really super high, even though they know in their minds it's going to collapse, if they grow too much, they grow too much. And when prices are low, they pull land out. So I think that we could see an overall.
Okay, Lalit has it's more an observation rather than a question. India would continue importing lentils, being the only main pulse with no quantitative restriction and has been economically viable with the added impact of COVID-19. Any comments on that observation, Pawan?
Can you repeat, Randy, the question?
From Lalit Banger, it is an observation rather than a question. India would continue importing lentils, being the only main pulse with no quantitative restriction, and it has been economically viable with added impact of COVID-19.
Till now, the government is in a comfortable shape, and they had already issued the import quotas for the rest of the pulses. So if things required, government may remove these quantity restrictions and maybe allowing imports under OGL.
Okay.
But Randy, the demand has increased by almost 20% in India for the pulses.
Okay. So a question for our friends from Australia and Canada. Has the demand for lentils increased in local consumption for Canada and Australia due to COVID-19? We'll start with you, Mostin.
We've certainly seen a localized demand for pulses in general. And if you look at the supermarket shelves for processed lentils, they're empty. There has been a significant demand, a food hoarding mentality in Australia. What does that mean demand-wise? It's a drop in the ocean, frankly, compared to other destination demand, but it is significant because for key pulses, not just red lentils, that we have local domestic demand for, Kabul chickpeas being an example, there has been huge demand locally that is sopping any exportable surplus. What we have seen though from red lentil demand is prior to now and for off-spec, there's been significant demand for the lower quality lentils in our feed market, because while we're seeing vegetable prices rally, pulse prices rally, we've also seen a rally in meat and livestock values as well, and they eat pulses, and one of the best pulses, as Sudhakar so rightly put, from a protein and return point of view, is lentils. And if you can put off-spec into that, and we did have a fair amount of that, that has gone to that ration. I just wanted to make the point on the hectares in Australia, and I think this is something Will, unfortunately, is not going to be able to join us. Wanted to make the point is we will see a hectare increase here around the edges. Certainly, the weather that we've had in the southern states has been positive for extra hectares, but really, the production in Australia is all a function of yield, and so putting a number on what our production is your testament to you're going to get caught out, because frankly, it's our game is yield. Our largest hectares ever were 18-19, and it was one of our lowest production per hectare years. So, we had less hectares in 16-17 than 18-19, and 3 times the production. So we have to be careful just to, at this stage, say, well, we're settled at number. So I think we'll definitely see increase in VIC, but the offset of that will be zero carry-in. So like 16-17, we're going to go into a year where there's going to be no carry-in on paper, and strong support. So to go back to the question that we've seen from numerous people on the Q&A and the chat about what pricing will do, we will take our lead from Canada. But really, if you're looking for an Australian lentil, you're going to be waiting for new crop. So it'll be a function of what Canadian pricing is doing. And if there's significant demand for Canadian, that sops up the domestic, the logistic demand for that front-end window, then our initial harvest pricing will be quite firm. No matter how big a hectares, no matter how big a yield we have, it's going to be a function of what happens with Canada.
Okay, so in Canada, we've certainly seen an increase in domestic consumption. There's been a lot of disruptions to the meat supply here, and so pulses are a natural way of having a shelf-stable protein in the home. So we've seen that bought up along with other shelf-stable staples like pasta and so on. So certainly. There's been a surge in demand, but we are a small population, so I don't think it has a great impact on the overall supply and demand dynamics worldwide. But definitely, the shelves are empty in the grocery stores in certain sections. And pulses is definitely one of those sections that's been affected, along with a few others. So we do see an increase. I think that'll continue for some time. We do think that the disruptions to meat supply will continue. There's been a major meat plant shut down recently due to COVID, and these impacts tend to take months to work through the supply chain. So we'll continue to see disruptions in protein supply, and pulses are a natural way to mitigate that at the home level. So I think we'll see continued buying of pulses in Canada.
Very good. So then, can you hear me, Kintal? You'll have to turn on your microphone. There you go.
Yes, I hear you.
So the next question is for you. What is the expectation for Black Sea region lentil seeding and production?
I think it's because of the price, the seedings. I don't think that will be increased. It's more looks like it will be reduced in this year. So it's our opinion. It's because we talk with the Russian guys who is around our region, so they don't have increased the lentil seeding in this year.
Is this due to price of wheat, or why is this?
You're talking about wheat or about the lentils?
About lentils. So why aren't they, with increased demand, why is lentil production not going up?
So it's wheat becomes more profitable than lentils.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's they don't have the plan to increase the sowing the lentils.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It is panic buying from all destinations. The supply chain remains same or more to the importing countries. There should be price drop very soon, although the demand seems stable. Agree or disagree?
I agree. The demand is there. The supply constraints are there, but probably we see this the constraint will remain same till this quarter up to June, and probably may ease out later on. But I see the demand will be there for next 2 quarters for all the pulses in India.
Any comments, David?
Teşekkür ederim. İyi olmaya çalışıyorum. Bağlanmadım 10 dakika. Her şey iyiydi. Sonra düştü ve tekrar giremiyorum. Yok yani. Şimdi telefonla...
David?
Yes. So I in terms of supply chain, I think there's risk of continued disruptions due to COVID. So things are improving right now. They were quite difficult in the last while, but they are improving now. However, we do see the risk of continued disruptions due to outbreaks in various segments of the supply chain. We're also seeing a reluctance of truckers willing to drive, so that affects the supply of vehicles. We've also seen diversion of domestic equipment into domestic supply, which is taking away from our ability to reach export destinations. So I don't think these supply chain disruptions are over. They are certainly getting better in the short term, but you'll see intermittent spikes in disruptions over the coming year.
Okay, thank you. Another question for Kintal. Will the delayed plantings in Kazakhstan result in lower yields?
Pardon? Can you repeat your question?
Will the delayed plantings in Kazakhstan result in lower yields?
I mean, last year or this year?
I assume they're talking about this year. Is there delayed plantings? Do you expect delayed plantings?
No, we don't expect the delays of planting.
Hmm.
Because actually we started to planting, and it's Atamaken-Agro, but mainly the other farmers will start in middle of May. So I don't think that it will be delay of the planting.
Okay, very good. Pawan, the next question is for you. NAFED, India, is sitting on a huge stock of pulses and new purchases is on full swing. NAFED is selling on lower prices. Will this put pressure on local prices and may put pressure on imports?
NAFED normally used to buy when the prices are below MSP. They are buying at the program of price support scheme, which is the program of a government of India, and due to which last 3-4 years NAFED has to come into the picture because the pulses are ruling below MSP levels, and they are sitting on a huge stock. But this stock has been depleting now. If you see, the pigeon peas, which was earlier around more than 2 million tons with the government, in last 3 years they have reduced it to probably maybe 300,000 or 400,000 tons. And now the NAFED has a stock of chickpeas rather than any other pulses. They have more stock of chickpeas, which is almost 1.6 million tons. Last this March end they had carrying those stocks. But looking at the demand and the supply disruption, though the harvesting started in India, but the thing is that the crop has gone to the farmer's house and their priorities has been changed. Because of this supply disruption, now the traders and miller has to depend on the NAFED stock. What government is doing right now, they are issuing local tenders to procure it for the conversion of the whole pulses into the split one and supply it to the consumers. So this is going on till next 3 or 4 months continuously. So this will deplete stocks from the NAFED rather than in imports basically.
Okay, Fethi, are you on the call? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm in here now.
Perfect.
Unfortunately, web is not working well just by the phone. I can.
Seems to be a problem around the world right now. Sudhakar,
Yeah.
are you as well?
By the pound sign.
I'm trying to connect by the phone now.
Okay, very good. Well, the next question is for you, Fethi. It is, or at least part of it. How is the red split lentil price in Turkey, Dubai, Egypt, and why has Ethiopia become such a large market for red split lentils, and will it continue going forward?
I think the main thing is nobody was expecting that price increase sharply. Then nobody took a position enough to supply the MENA region and Africa, Ethiopian market especially. All of a sudden, when prices start to increase and their special time of their religious time approach, then they have noticed that they don't have the cargo, and they don't have the cargo in the region even. Dubai, Turkey, and Egypt also. So that's why all of a sudden they pressed up for the quick delivery. Then it created a panic mood in the market. So, hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Yeah.
Randy,
So,
I'm back. Now I'm connected by the phone.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why there was a panic mood in the market. Then this is, I think, another effect of what we are doing in the past. Emotional behaviors and affected all the prices, and the supply-demand equilibrium is not was the issue to determine the prices. Then we saw that increase in the prices in very short term. As all we are aware from the presentations, And as we were aware of the market participants, it is not the supply-demand problem. This is quick delivery problem and the panic mode. And of course the main press from another issue was the hoarding of the consumers because of that pandemic. It was the second step. The first step was there was no availability of the cargo in the region. When you order the Canada, as I always said, you are receiving the cargo in 3 months. So, but because Turkey, Dubai, Egypt was holding the cargo and supplying in very quick way, but because of the very stable prices last 1 year, nobody was sitting by the demand. That was the reason, I think.
So, Fethi, while you are here, quickly, do you agree with the numbers which are in the sheet about close to 400,000 tons of production, similar imports and similar exports from Turkey?
400,000, yeah. 400,000, I agree with that. Yeah, as I said, I agree with the 400,000 ton total crop number. And definitely, what can we say as a sure what can I say from my side as a sure that the Turkish crop is more than last year, minimum 30%. This is also the numbers of the Ministry of Agriculture of Turkish Republic. So then definitely we will have more than the last year. So that we will have the better crop than the last year.
And what about the imports and exports prospects?
Also, I agree with that. But you know that the chart is showing there is a confusion of conception in that. Turkey is not importing. Turkey is getting the cargo for re-exporting. I mean, we are not importing and consuming domestically. So when we are talking about the chart, we are putting, let's say, for 350,000 tons from Canada to Turkey, or from Australia and Canada to Turkey. But it is not going to the Turkish domestic market. This is going for the re-export to the region.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, again,
this is so let's rephrase the question. So what number you think Turkey can import and re-export?
Import means getting in, right? Not.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think we will have again 300,000 ton numbers this year, because the Turkish, yeah.
And the similar quantity you'll be able to export.
Yeah, I said the same formula in the last presentation I did last year in the CISL. What I'm saying that Turkey is exporting what he is importing. That is the simple formula, because our total production always sufficient to our domestic consumption.
Thank you very much. That was very nicely explained. I see a question from here to address to Pawan. Do you agree with the production number of Brian on the Indian production side?
Being a trader, if you ask me, our numbers are smaller than what Brian has given the numbers with.
Okay. So on that note, maybe what we can do, earlier when I was collecting data, I had a request from the government saying that whenever there is webinar is happening, please feel free to include us. So if you allow me, I'll take the MD of NAFED, Mr. Singh, and ask him his view, what is happening, what does he think in terms of production. That will be making it quite balanced. Let me see if I can join, if I can call him and take him in conference so that we all can hear. So, Mr. Singh, this is Sudhakar Tomar speaking.
Yeah.
And
yes, how are you? Good evening.
Good evening, sir. I have with me our.
I'm watching.
Yeah. So we were talking, and we wanted to have the government side of the view in terms of production. Please enlighten us so that we have a better understanding of the situation.
The government data estimates the production of 1.3 million tons of lentils in India during this Rabi season. Maybe we shall be down by 10 to 15% of the estimate, but it should not be less than 1.2. I'm talking from trader perspective, not from the government of India's side.
So 15 to 20% reduction is
maximum.
That is clear.
Maybe because of the weather conditions in the last few weeks and the harvest problems which we may have faced during COVID.
That's so nice of you. Thank you very much. Please continue watching. We will, if there's anything else, we will again bother your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that was NAFED. Their vision is that Indian production could be down 15 to 20% from the previous production number. So that puts us in a gap of about 200,000 tons between what the private trade is estimating and what is the government version. And Randy, you can move to the next question now.
Okay. Question from Gordon Bacon. Last week's webinar mentioned canceled container ship sailing and reduced consumer spending that will reduce supply of containers. What impact might this have on markets importing red lentils?
Yeah, it is having an impact. We've seen this where containers are not coming back from China, where typically containers are leaving Canada with crops and coming back with various manufactured goods from overseas. So now it's become difficult to get sufficient equipment. We're seeing an improvement right now, but I think overall these lockdowns around the world are disrupting the flow of containers, and we'll see that I think improving but continuing to be an issue going forward for some time.
Hadi, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Did you hear the question? Yes.
Regarding shortage of containers?
Shortage of containers and the effect of the economy on consumer spending. Will that impact purchases?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, from Pakistan's point of view, this year we've been importing as per need basis. So our overall consumption per year is 125,000 metric tons. So that works about to 10 to 12,000 metric ton per month. So as of April this year, we've imported we've received about 40,000 metric tons. So just pretty much like at par with what our local consumption is. So if there are delays as such, if there's shortages and the virus and all these things, that would definitely, create further shortages on our side. We've seen because of the virus and because of everyone was active, Pakistani market became really hot, and Pakistan was buying big quantities from Australia and Canada. So any sort of disruptions would make us active again, and we'd keep on buying.
Okay. From a seller's perspective, Mohsin, what are you seeing now?
So it has been an issue, and it continues to be an issue. What we're seeing is effectively slack capacity from a packing or grower delivery point of view can't be met by containers, especially ex-Adelaide, which is 2/3 of Australia's lentil production. So the load is going towards Victoria, which is part of the reason we're seeing an exacerbation of price, is that there's the area that has less lentils but can move tons isn't able to do so. So that's been part of this exacerbation we're seeing in the last 3 months on pricing out of Australia. The fact that COVID-19 and also just a general lack of containers and a lack of imports because of a low Aussie dollar has led to a dearth of containers. And again, I don't see this getting better in the short term. I think generally with the container logistics timeframe, you're looking quarter by quarter. So I don't see this getting better until at least August, September.
I think the next question is for Brian. It says you based your 2020 Canadian crop estimates based on 2,613,000 acres to be planted. I think you said hectares, but after prices rallied up by more than 30 cents per pound at the farmer level, don't you think it will hit 2,900,000 acres?
It's always possible. What you have to what you have to recall about prices is that they were between the beginning of January and the end of March. There was very little movement in the price of red lentil at the grower level. It's only been in April that prices have escalated. That's a critical observation because normally 16%, on average, 16% of all lentils grown in Canada are seeded in April, and the balance by the end of May, the lentil crop is basically sown in Canada. So what we're talking about is that from this point on, is we've got 5 weeks to seed the crop in which the crop will be seeded, and I think that from that perspective, it's too late for the increase. For prices to escalate in April is a bit too late for a lot of farmers to change their plans because they will have already bought their planting seed and they'll already have bought the chemicals they need. And while some can still switch because they wait until the last minute and some have their own facilities so they can move their seeding around, it's too late for many farmers to change what they will plant. When I look at these things, I'm looking at the situation up until February or so, February at the beginning of March, and what influence that will have on planting. What happens after can sometimes often be too late. If this had happened, that's why I said earlier in my comments, if this had happened in February or January, we would see a bigger explosion in red lentil area in Canada than I think we will see this year. Tomorrow's Statistics Canada was supposed to issue its seeding intentions report for Canada. That is delayed and perhaps unpublished, so we may have to wait a long time for an independent observation on how much was sown here.
Okay. David, any additional comments there?
No, I think that's pretty well covered. I agree with those comments.
I guess maybe this would be a question for everyone. What are the current demand patterns like from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, keeping in mind the month of Ramadan and also the lockdown due to COVID-19? Hadi, are you back? Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. So basically, in terms of Pakistan, what happened was we were an active buyer throughout the last month or so, and the markets were moving up. The last few days, what we're seeing is like prices at origin, at least, it seems that they're coming down a bit. So this week has been a little bit slow, but Pakistan is definitely an active player. Ramadan is starting in 3 days. So we would see Pakistan to be a buyer throughout as time goes on and off. Pakistan would be active, I would say.
So what kind of tonnage do you have for Pakistan, Hadi?
As I said, like stocks wouldn't be like our stock levels are being utilized as they're coming in. We're not holding on to like big stocks. We've seen price jump locally at least twice by about $50 to $100 per metric ton in the local market. But when there is arrival, the market cools down a little bit. But in 5-10 days, a week's time, we see prices come back up again. Indication that there aren't many like stocks in our warehouses, so we're kind of consuming as they're coming in. And
we were talking more on the side of import quantity. Like what kind of import quantity we'll see coming from Pakistan in this year?
I would say like this would be we would be on par of importing our average consumption. So we've imported about 40,000 metric tons so far this year. I would say another 60 to 80,000 metric ton is expected to come in throughout the year, because the stocks aren't as much, so we're dependent on importing, and we'll keep on importing whatever the markets are offering.
So we should put the annual demand close to 125,000 tons coming in this year, including whatever has been imported.
Yes. So sometimes when you have stocks from before, you would import less the next year. But since our stock levels aren't that high, we would expect the imports to be as regular, or even maybe more imports than needed if the markets remain firm. And then next year it balances itself out.
Excellent. Okay, on Sri Lanka side, it's about 175,000 tons, and demand is slightly likely to be increased because of the COVID situation. People switching to lentils as it boosts the immunity and as well as it's readily available. So about 175,000 tons number you can pencil in for Sri Lanka. And we'll go back to Mustin when he's back and talk about Bangladesh. Let's move on to the next question. I think lentil stock position India has been answered. This question, Kintal, I would like you to take. It is a question from Tanveer Zadi. Do you think India will enter into phyto agreement with CIS countries, or vice versa? CIS countries will enter into India anytime soon. Is there any development happening on this front between Kazakhstan, Russia signing phyto protocol with the major destination like India?
Currently, I don't know what the situation with this protocol, but I know that the Ministry of Agriculture is doing some things on develop it, but I don't know exactly what has happened now, what the status of this document.
Maybe we move to Kintal because everybody wants to know. Kintal, can you give us a forecast? What is happening in Black Sea side between Ukraine, Russia, but mostly Kazakhstan? How much lentils you see this year coming for this because you should be harvesting sometime in July or August as well, right?
Yes, it's in Kazakhstan. We're going to harvesting. It's end of the August, and Kazakhstan is planting 100. We expected that we'll be planting 105,000 hectares, and expectations that it's for export will be 76,000 tons. What is going on in Russia? Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what's. I think it will be should be the same quantity as was last year. So it's my expectation on it.
Right. So about 100,000 tons coming from Kazakhstan. Okay. Randy, let's move on to the next question. How much time do we have for the question? I think probably a couple of.
Just maybe one more, Sudhakar, and then we've got to wrap up. It's set for an hour and a half.
Okay, so all people, all attendees, all panelists, those who have the access to chat, there is a quiz option open. Everybody, can you please do your prediction and give a prize for new crop Crimson number 2 for September-October shipment, CIF Jebel Ali, and the winner will get $1,000 prize sponsored by Arab India Spices. This will be a very good idea for us to make sense what we have been hearing for last 1.5 hour. So, and this will also be a good incentive for the correct guessing. Please try to guess in a single digit, like a single number instead of giving a range. The closest prize will be announced in the next webinar. This is a GPC webinar. So please make an informed, educated guess. Crimson number 2, new crop shipment, September-October, CIF Jebel Ali. Price is $1,000. Okay, so let's see the last question. How much? This is a very interesting question. How much red lentil seed is available? I think probably what Farhan means, how much red lentil production can be increased in Canada and Australia? Is there a concern that the seed availability is relatively less compared to demand? This question, I think, is directed to David as well as Mustin. Let David get a go at this one first.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear clearly. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, Farhan is asking how much extra seed is available in Canada to increase the production from the current projected levels.
Oh, I see. I don't think seed is the constraint so much as timing here. I think to increase production, decisions need to be made in the very short term. Seeding is beginning here, so it's not a question of lack of seed, more a question of have farmers already made their decision or not, and whether they're prepared to change at this stage.
So I'm just getting a WhatsApp that's asking about the Australian area sign. So my take on it is we're going to be up about 10 to 15%, which is effectively at the edges. It'll be similar hectares to 17-18 and 18-19. And given the weather outlook, you can work on an average yield. So the production figures we've sent through are representative of that. So let's call it 450,000 production at this stage from an SA, from Australia. There was a question about Bangla demand as well. I think we're seeing consistent Bangla demand for the type and variety we grow. One point I would make, though, is a big reason why we had so many of the type variety available in the last 3 years is due to the agronomics of a type called Hurricane. That lentil is being looked to be replaced by growers by a nugget type variety called Hallmark, which potentially in this new crop see a change in hectares back to the normal 1/3 small, 1/3 medium, 1/3 large. So let's call that 1/3 nipper, 1/3 nugget, 1/3 jumbo. So potentially we see a change this year in our production availability, which will change the pathway that those lentils go.
Oh, thank you, Mustin. Just one last and final question to our panelists. David, just give us a range, what you feel the price for the new crop. Same goes for Pawan, Kintal, Mustin, Hadi, everyone who's ever on the panel. One number, and then we thank you all, and we wrap up the session. David, you go first.
Okay, my number would be 720.
I assume that's a Canadian dollar.
No, US dollar.
And this is for the new crop?
Yeah.
Pawan, what is your prediction for the new crop? Crimsons?
My prediction will be 580 to 600 US dollars CIF India.
That's again American dollars, not Canadian dollars.
Yeah, American dollars.
Kintal, what's your number?
I like David's prices, so I agree with David.
Okay. Mustin, what do you say? That
destination number for new crop, I reckon we're going to be looking at around 600 US for Aussie. Growers won't sell below what wet relativities are.
Hadi, what do you say, buddy?
I think 550, I would go with that. Compared to what last year was 390, 400, I think that's still pretty high, 550.
Very good. Anyway, so that leaves us. That leaves our 250 odd people who are still. I think they're still on the web. Please make up your mind and do your prediction and send on the chat. And with this, I thank all my panelists, analysts, our admin team for conducting a very interesting red lentil webinar. Despite technical glitches, especially I'm very sorry because I got completely cut and then I had to call in by the phone. So gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We would be very happy to know that we had more than 250 join from various countries, and we look forward to our next session of Kabuli chickpeas, which is on
April 30th.
Randy, when is the date for the April 30th? That's going to be another very interesting session. Please join in, and goodbye. Stay home, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and eat more lentils.